nice skin, so gorgeous. We thank the life gorgeous. Thank the life gorgeous. I love the life gorgeous. Its torso is so tight.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Craig Kilby. My friends call me Lord Kilby. Some say Craigers, down-to-earth, casual Craigers. Welcome to The Life Gorgeous. This is where I share my magical life in hopes of improving your life. Special show today. You people have told me, the focus groups have told me, you like when I have my friends on and we shoot the breeze and I answer fan questions, and then my friend will critique my answer and also weigh in on the question. Today, a friend of mine who you've seen before, he is a producer, writer, funny guy, bright guy. He works at Hungry Man, which is a big commercial company that does commercials for the Super Bowl. He is the managing partner there, and his name is Caleb Dewart. Dewart, put your hands together. Hey, Caleb, how are you, buddy?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on again. I guess I didn't screw it up last time. I felt less pressure last time because Hank was on with us.
You're going solo, but it's less of an interview, but more of a you weighing in, giving your opinions, because I consider you an opinionated person. Have you been told that before?
I have. It occasionally gets me into trouble. So
right.
Yeah.
The elephant in the room is last time you were on, you used a term, flavor profile. Wait, I don't want to laugh when I say it. Flavor profile. We were talking about some food. I think we were talking about Thanksgiving or something, but you said flavor profile. First of all,
terrible.
Have you ever used that term before? Because sometimes when I'm broadcasting or talking, I will say a word or a phrase that I really don't use that often. It just comes out in maybe a performance. Have you ever used the term flavor profile before?
Not frequently. It's definitely not frequently, but it's, when you're trying to describe to someone, I believe I was trying to describe a squash galette, I think was the flavor profile of the squash galette. But yeah, so I guess I'm not going to ever live that one down. Thank you.
So do you admit to being pretentious? At least in that moment, you were pretentious, but are you pretentious other times?
In general, my father is pretentious. I think I'm just slightly below it. I inherited some of his affects, but not all of them. He went to Harvard. He calls it Harvard College. I did not even apply because I knew I wouldn't get in. And I also didn't want to go to school with all the people I went to high school with. So he drops Harvard College quite a bit, and among other things. So if he's pretentious, I'm a hair below, but I've inherited quite a bit of.
What did your father do for a living?
He still does it. He's a sculptor.
Oh.
He's an artist. Yeah.
Would you say he didn't use his college education then, or did he actually study art at Harvard?
He studied art. I think his major was general studies.
Okay.
But, he did study art, and then he graduated and moved to a tree house in Vermont and met my mother.
Right. Are they hippies?
They were hippies. They were hippies. Right. There's, they made their living in the mid 70s when I was born, picking apples and making maple syrup and living off the land in a house with no running water. So, but then, eventually moved, back to society. And my dad became a public school teacher. Actually, he was a public school teacher for 30 years.
No running water. Yeah. Is that why to this day you only shower once every 2 weeks? No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly.
Did you grow up in Boston or outside of Boston? Because I know you're a big Boston sports fan.
Yeah. Big Boston sports fan. Brookline, which, I think it's different than maybe the Midwest or even the West Coast when you talk about cities, because Brookline is, I grew up one train stop from Kenmore Square or Fenway Park.
Okay.
It was technically a suburb, but it was very urban.
So I've been to Boston a few times. I love historic cities. I love old architecture. I actually got to go to the old Boston Garden before they tore it down. I went to, I think it's called Fours, but whatever the sports bar is, I can't remember. There's a guy from Boston that we know, Bill Simmons, and I was talking to him once a few years ago. This is about the Patriots and stuff, and he did say that is the people from Boston, there's a sensitivity. Is that true? I mean, I guess I'm going into the whole Patriots thing. Did you guys handle this dynasty well? But go ahead. What is the sensitivity that he might be talking about?
I mean, I think Boston fans are some of the best and worst. I would not classify myself as a normal Boston fan. You know, I grew up in the 80s. My heroes were Larry Bird, Kevin McHale. I did not hate the Lakers. I really didn't hate the Lakers. I think because my name is Caleb, and it sounds dumb, but my name is Caleb and people could never pronounce it. So they would call me Caleb. And so my mother made me a t-shirt that said Caleb Abdul-Jabbar. And, and I was a fan of those guys. Yeah, exactly. I was a fan of those guys. I hated Kurt Rambis in the same way that people probably really hate Danny Ainge. He's kind of a jerky player. But what, are you going to hate James Worthy? You're going to hate Magic? Kareem? I mean, it's like hating excellence is sort of tiresome, I think appreciating. So I don't consider myself a normal, even though I'm obsessed with Boston sports, I don't consider myself a normal Boston fan. But yes, Boston fans are very sensitive. I think that's changed a bit, just the unbelievable success that Boston's had this last 20 years in every sport. It's really insane. I think there's easiness that's come that wasn't there before. I think like in the same way that San Francisco fans hate Los Angeles fans, but LA fans don't really care about San Francisco fans. I feel like New Yorkers never really cared about Boston fans, but Boston fans hated New Yorkers. But now I think it's sort of softened just because we've been so great for so long.
Yeah, there's a thing like as a Minnesota Viking fan, again, we moved to Minnesota and my father told me don't get suckered in because they're talented. They're always been talented and good. Don't get suckered in. So I like the Vikings, but I don't hate the Packers. And I'm supposed to hate the Packers, but I liked Bart Starr. I liked Brett Favre and I love Aaron Rodgers. And I also like the small market, the Lambeau Field, just like I like the San Antonio Spurs. So I don't hate the Packers, but I know what you're saying. And when I was playing ball at Montana State, it was the 80s, and I was a Dr. J fan, and most of the guys on the team were either Celtic fans or Laker fans. And I always enjoyed going up to them and saying, who's the biggest whiner in the NBA? And the Laker fans would say Danny Ainge. And the Celtic fans would say Kareem and Magic. Every time Magic drives, he's whining. So I always entertain myself by asking that. So I wanted to ask you, well, first of all, what are your thoughts? He was competitive with Peyton Manning. Do you loathe Peyton Manning, or what are your thoughts on Peyton Manning? And will you even be honest when you answer this?
I think Peyton Manning was an unbelievable quarterback. I think he's actually very funny. I think he's got
that's true. You've just gone off of the football skill, but that's okay.
Yeah, yes, no. But I think like his SNL performances, some of the commercials he's done are funny.
Right.
I think he's an odd guy for sure. Like I've not to disclose too much. We've worked with him. He's definitely very serious. It seems. When the camera's off, he's a little bit just kind of this, and then he turns it on.
Right.
But I think like an unbelievable talent. I think probably, his physical, his back issues, I think he got robbed of some years and probably some Super Bowls just with injuries. But I think he was an unbelievable talent. I mean, certainly more talented probably than Tom Brady in a traditional sense.
Thank you,
in a traditional
Caleb,
sense,
for being honest. Thank you, Caleb. This is my whole thing because Tom Brady says Aaron Rodgers is more talented than he is. And I know that winning, it's black and white. You win a Super Bowl, you're the greatest of all time. So you measure it by Super Bowls, but some of us have vision and we can see defense, the team's defense and the team's personnel, and we can see those things. I was obsessed with Dan Marino and his quick release. So I like talent.
I like winning more. Yeah,
but because you're simple. You're a simple kid from out there, and it's like this is. Yeah, I mean, Larry Legend, the way he passed the ball. They won 3 championships. Larry Legend, I believe it was 3. I think did Magic win 4 or 5? I can't remember. But I love those Celtics. So I do like style and I do like talent. But Brady, I think I told you this before. I've told somebody. When you say he's maybe not as talented as Peyton Manning and Aaron Rodgers is what Brady says, I think that focuses him on the little things, which is, I got to get this ball out quick or I'm going to get sacked. And you could also say get it out quickly. I like to do LYs sometimes. But when you're a little limited, he's not limited, but when you're not as talented, see, Aaron Rodgers is like, I can dance all day back here. Oops, I just got sacked. Mm-hmm. So I think sometimes when you're extremely talented, you might forget some of the little things that help in winning. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. And I think, that's what happened to Peyton Manning. His back got destroyed with too many. I mean, Tom Brady never really a handful of bad hits in his career. I mean, really, truly, and his, minor injuries. I mean, he had that, what is it, one season, I think he lost with that knee injury. So again, Peyton just got destroyed, with that, I think it was his upper neck, right? His spine. Since we're talking about sports, can I ask you a question yet?
Yes, you may.
Or do we have to wait for me to ask you a question? So I was up late last night thinking about this appearance, and I wanted to get your perspective, not to come off as a sycophant, but I'm very curious about your feelings, your perspective on self-confidence in sports and also in performing and acting. And I was watching Caitlin Clark last night in the Final Four, Iowa State or University of Iowa player who unbelievable. I mean, 40 plus points, just crazy talent. And she's got the Steph Curry swagger. She has unbelievable swagger. She's like waving off, like she's not going to defend someone. She's getting in people's heads, and she's, 21 years old.
Right.
As someone who you played, pretty high level sports, you played college, I'm not going to toot your horn too much. You can toot it yourself, but you played, Division I basketball. I've seen the picture of you shooting a jumper.
Right.
Like, where does that come from? And like, did you always have self-confidence? You obviously did well in high school.
I'll focus on sports and self-confidence as opposed to moving outside. If you want to move outside of sports, we can. So my dad wanted us to play baseball. My dad was a Willie Mays fan. My brother and I were not good in baseball. My brother was 3 grades ahead of me. In 5th grade, he started playing basketball in elementary school. My dad put up a basket in our driveway, and I took to basketball. And I was just, what happened was I was taller than most guys. I was 5'9" in 6th grade. I was 5'3" in 5th grade, 6-inch growth spurt. But I was coordinated. I was always coordinated, which put me in a different category. So I could always handle the ball because I'd watch my brother at practice in 2nd grade dribble the ball on the side of the court. The coach came up and said, are you left-handed? Why are you dribbling with your left hand? I said, I can already dribble with my right hand. So I think when you're good at something early on, it builds confidence. And you have to understand, sports is competition. So if someone's guarding me, you want to beat his ass. You want to take him to the rim. If there are a bunch of guys around the rim, you're going to shoot that pretty jump shot. And it took me years to develop the jump shot because when you're a kid, you always have your elbow out and you have to tuck it in like this. You have to tuck in your elbow. And that took me years of practice. But basketball, you can practice by yourself in the driveway. You don't have to go to the hockey rink or the baseball field with other people. So as far as confidence, I think it came because I was good at it from an early age. But I'll tell you something that on a little different side note, my favorite player before I discovered Dr. J was Walt Clyde Frazier of the Knicks, and he showed no emotion. He was the king of cool. And then Dr. J didn't show emotion. When Dr. J would do a windmill dunk, he didn't pound his chest running back. I also like Bjorn Borg, the Iceborg, no emotion. So I like being stoic and dominating. So I don't know if there was that swagger, but I think the confidence was I'm way better than the opponent and all these guys. I was the best player in town. Granted, it was a small town. And my dad used to say, if we had moved from New Jersey, I don't know if you guys would make the team back east. The ball was much better back east. So how does that sound? Does that answer it somewhat?
Yeah, no, that answers it. And then that transition for you from, Division I basketball player to getting into broadcasting and ending up where you ended up. I mean, were you just faking it until you made it, or did you have that same self-confidence that you were going to be better than other people at that?
When I was a kid, okay, my dad was very, very funny. He was very bright, flew through the crossword puzzles, and I hung out with my older brother and my dad. I didn't hang out with my peers. And my dad told me when I was young that I was very verbal. I was clever. I was writing jokes when I was young. It's a good question because my brother is introverted and not as confident as I am. And I'll tell you what's really weird. There is a thing in society sometimes where they sometimes think if you're confident, that's not a good thing, because you have to walk the line of not being over, too arrogant, even though sometimes I'll do it as a shtick. But I used to say you're supposed to say, hey, you go up to the teacher in second grade, I got to go to the bathroom. Don't be shy. I have to go to the bathroom. Now, of course, I'm going to check my hair as opposed to use the bathroom, but that's okay. It's a side note. But I mean, don't you think it's healthy to, I think it's better to be self-liking, self-accepting than self-loathing. So confidence or comfort in your own skin, I believe, is a positive. Your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that my parents instilled in me a belief that I could do anything, which, is a real blessing, to have that feeling, knowing that, it's a rational self-confidence, right? When you're young and you don't actually, you're not good at anything, you haven't achieved anything, but the belief that,
right,
anything is possible. I think that, you talk about parents. I think the fact that my parents were both artists was an interesting thing for me, because it just frames the idea that, you can do anything you want as long as it's something that you really love.
Right.
That's the key, is to find something that you really enjoy. And that's a challenging bar for, I think, a lot of people, because, most people have jobs they're miserable in, or they, arrive at a career, get into it, and then realize they don't enjoy it, but then they're sort of stuck. I felt so lucky that my work has been very fluid, ultimately, that it's constantly changing, and I could have gotten bored of some part of it, but, it's evolved and doesn't seem to be stopping, its evolution, which makes it fun.
So you enjoy your job. I know that there are a lot of people out here, including yourself, who are good writers. And I've told the story before where, I had this guy who was a property manager. He's a friend of mine. He's from Pasadena. And a property manager, when I bought my house in the hills, he'd say, I got a plumber for you. I got an electrician for you. I got all these contacts. And he said to me that he was a nerd. He said, I've been a nerd in high school. I'm a nerd. And furthest thing from the Hollywood industry. And he had this audio guy setting up my outdoor speakers at my new house. And the audio guy was from the United Kingdom somewhere. And he had his hair in a ponytail, and he was working underneath my house for a couple of days. And then I came home and he was done, and he had left. He had left a note and said, the outdoor speakers are good. Here's my CD. I do Celtic music. And there's a picture of him with his hair down, and he's wearing, velvet purple jacket in the field, and he does Celtic music. And I called my guy, Monty, and I said, man, everybody in this town is in the industry. It would be like if you told me you wrote a screenplay. And Monty says, I've written 5 of them, Craig. I mean, everybody. So when you say you love your gig at Hungry Man, a very successful commercial company, do you have other ambitions and dreams to do other things? And is it frustrating when because it's such a competitive and tenuous and inconsistent business?
I think it's the business itself has an energy to it that's unlike any other part of, if the industry of Hollywood is filmmaking, television, and then commercials. And commercials, I think a lot of people don't have respect for commercials from a creative standpoint, because it's ultimately a massive creative compromise because you're selling a product. But if it's in that sort of second tier thing, the difference between it and television and film is that as a company and the directors that we represent, all we're ever doing is looking at opportunity and saying either yes or no. And that is an incredibly energizing thing that does not exist. That is not a dynamic that exists in television and film. Film and television is you're trying to create the opportunity and you're trying to sell the idea. You're putting in all of this work as opposed to you're receiving this thing like, hey, here's this script from this advertising agency. Right. They want your director to make it. What's their take on it? So it's a different dynamic that ultimately is, so energizing. And listen, film and television, we have a film and television department that we started in the last year, and we're serious about trying to make films and television. We're producing our first documentary right now with Nanette Burstein about Carl Sagan for Nat Geo. That's really exciting. We're co-producing it with Seth MacFarlane's company, Fuzzy Door. Right. And it's going to be an unbelievable documentary about Carl Sagan. So we're in that business as well, but it's a slog. It's a slog. It's a tougher road. It's a tougher road to sell in. You're packaging talent. You're getting actors on board. Getting a writer. Optioning this. A life rights. All those types of things. So commercials are just are energizing and fun, and yes, it's a compromise of creativity. But still, you get to work with the same people you work with on movies. Wayne McClammy, who's our, probably our top director, he's working with Dion Beebe right now, who's a phenomenal cinematographer who makes huge movies. You're working with unbelievable talents at every step. So
commercials pay well. So you mentioned something. I want to go back to the confidence thing because there's this term I want to run by you, and I have thoughts on it. There is a term called unearned confidence. And I've heard it from, in the entertainment industry, from comedy, the Ron Burgundy films. So you got this kind of buffoonish guy, unearned confidence, Ron Burgundy, the Anchorman. This is from Will Ferrell and Adam McKay. So I get it. Here's my problem in real life with the term unearned confidence, because there might be some blowhards that are enjoying their life. They might be from Texas. They might drink beer. They might belch a lot. And who is the self-righteous judge of what's earned and unearned? Go ahead. Your response.
That's a tough one. Because listen, I admire self-confidence. I think there's, and that was actually my sort of follow-up question for you on this topic is actually intelligence and self-confidence and the relationship between the two, or the lack of relationship between the two, especially in sports. Because I think it's actually interesting when, clearly very bright players are also very good, because in my mind, part of being really intelligent is having self-doubt and being self-critical. And I find that fascinating. Like, Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, incredibly bright. Yeah. Like clearly bright guys. Tom Brady? I don't know if he's that smart.
Right. I have to say something. There was a basketball coach in the 70s at Marquette named Al McGuire. Might be before your time. He won a championship at Marquette. And then he became an analyst on NBC Sports for college hoops. And he said something once. His opinion, really bright people don't always make great athletes because they're too aware. My brother was lone valedictorian of his graduating class of 500. He wasn't super confident on the court. He'd get nervous. So there is a thing there where some of the guys, it affects them where they're too aware of the surroundings. It's the end of the game. Oh my God, what if I miss this shot? As opposed to guys like Kobe who would take every last shot and then storm off if he missed. I have this theory that people think Kobe has the killer instinct more than LeBron, because when LeBron misses a game winner, he'll walk off the court, a little bummed, but Kobe will walk off mad like I'm making the next 10. There's a body language that Kobe had, and people are seduced by his aggression. But there's another thing, since I didn't know we were going there, but it's fine. I have this thing in life that I find entertaining, where I've worked with some self-righteous people who are bitter. I have to use that word. and actually I'm going to run this by you. I had it for the questions later, but there are political zealots in the world, and I've worked with them, and I use the technical term, and I'm joking. I say it's a technical term. I think I came up with, or maybe Freud did, but neurotic bitter freaks. That's my joke. But when people judge others' intelligence, I sometimes find it very entertaining, because if you disagree with someone, you might question their intelligence, as opposed to saying, well, they're actually intellectuals that disagree with each other and have different worldviews. So my question is, do you find yourself judging others' intelligence often, or do you realize that there are bright people out there who have different opinions?
Oh man, that's a tough one.
Is that too deep?
I mean,
is the Life Gorgeous going too deep today?
Are we going too deep? No, I don't know. I think that, I have friends who, I would say one of my brighter friends. I have a few folks that are, impressive, intellects, and one of them is, I'm pretty liberal. He's quite conservative, and ultimately it's sort of like, that's more about priorities, like what are the things that you think are important for him? It's not paying taxes, right? That's ultimately, he just doesn't want to pay taxes. Like that's his, like nothing else, nothing else matters.
Okay. That is hilarious.
Yeah.
When you say this guy is very bright. My brother is very pro environment, and I do it on my Instagram, where I've always been pro environment, and I didn't know where you were going in this guy. What's next? He wants to not pay taxes, and he wants to find the perfect strip club or something like really shallow. I just thought that was funny. But the other thing I wanted to say is I know people, and I've joked, I said I'm not well-rounded, and I'm proud of that, because there's so many things that don't interest me. When I was doing television, there were all these current events. Like, I didn't care about the Joan Benet Ramsey case. I didn't follow it. I also, there are a lot of movies and television shows I haven't seen. I say I have friends who are, I don't consider well-rounded, but they're brilliant, and they're software engineers, and they work so many hours, fixing these problems, coming up with this software. And the rest of the time is spent exercising, sleeping, eating, and maybe watching a sporting event or a movie to release their stress. So they're not up on the pronouns and the social issues. So I don't consider them well-rounded. So what do you think of the statement, you can be a very bright person but not well-rounded? And usually it's by choice.
I mean, the thing about judgment and about, it's like the people that judge, people for a theoretical lack of intelligence or something is ultimately, if you have empathy, if you really are an empathetic person, I think you can try to evaluate everyone's path as their own, whether it's, political disagreements, people that, are pro-life or, not pro-life, things like that you just go like, well, they're on their own, trip. These are the things that they find important, and they've been informed by how they were raised and who their parents were, and
right.
how they grew up, and the religion that they were raised with or not raised with. Yeah, it's hard to not be judgmental. I'm certainly pretty judgmental, but I mean, I feel like if anything in our especially this country, but I think in our culture in general right now, we have a lack of empathy happening. And I think my hope for the future is that someone will come along as a leader that will really truly be empathetic in a way that brings people together. Not to get too deep or heavy on this.
Right.
Life Gorgeous here, but
right. The Life Gorgeous is all encompassing, and you made me think about a couple things. One is, are you able to say what state your friend lives in who doesn't want to pay his fair share of taxes? Whatever fair
Connecticut.
Share.
Connecticut.
So I do have a thing, and I don't harp on this, because what I've noticed is that people who make a certain amount of money, they don't care at all about the bracket above them. They could care less. My thing was simple, and I'm not talking about corporations, because it gets a little more detailed there in tax breaks and all these different things. Like ESPN was going to leave Bristol years ago, you leave Connecticut and go to San Diego, California. Connecticut gave it a bunch of tax breaks, so ESPN stayed there. But I'm talking more, that's easy to relate to is salaries. So, if an NBA player makes $5 million a year, LeBron makes $30 million a year, how much should he be able to keep? Should he be able to keep 50%? When I worked, my accountant said, you're going to pay Just think of it as 50, you're losing 50%. And that doesn't include the property tax that I was paying. And I'm like, can I keep, you're a majority owner of a team when you have 51%. Can I keep 51% and just, I'm paying a lot in taxes, and can't the government use this as efficiently as possible? But it's a thing where I talk to people and they go, those guys should be, and they're not paying, LeBron's not paying 15 million in taxes if he makes 30 million. He's got to, so okay, he's paying an accountant then to be creative if he's not paying 15 million. But do you have any thoughts on taxes in California?
I mean, it's a great state to live in. I love the town I live in. I live in Glendale. Shout out to Glendale. I'm happy to pay taxes. I don't, you can drive yourself insane thinking about what you don't have because of where you live. I mean, so there's a reason I don't live in Florida or Texas, states that I'm just not interested in being in. I was skiing earlier this week. After this podcast, I'm driving out to Palm Springs.
Oh,
you're haunting.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's a gift. The state.
It's a beautiful state. And I fell in love with Northern California at first because that's where I came out of college to San Francisco and then Carmel by the Sea. I've always been comfortable. I've had nice homes built in the 1920s, and I pay hefty property tax, but I'm proud of it because they use that to pave the roads. So the young people, I feel good. They can text on a smooth road while they're driving, and they won't get in a fender bender. So I'm helping the young people with a smooth asphalt road with my taxes. Thank you for that.
I hear you.
Let's go to the fan questions. This is where people ask me questions. They go to the voicemail at the YouTube channel. Sometimes they leave a comment. You can also do it on my Instagram and ask me questions. We've got a lot today. I don't know how many we'll get to because we went long. Also, you said prior, you texted me and said you had questions. You've already asked one. Do you have other questions that you want to do in the fan questions?
Yes, I have. I think 2 questions that I want to ask.
Why don't we start with one of your questions and then I'll call on it again. Go with your first question.
My first question is, there's a phrase that I have said quite a bit. I used to produce music videos and I met a lot of, musical artists. I came to the conclusion that you should never meet your heroes.
Oh.
For you, as someone who, you're in that rare spot of, you've obviously met a lot of people over the years, some of whom are probably your heroes and some of them not. And then you've also been in the position of being someone who is admired and appreciated for your talents. Tell me about your perspective on both things. As a fan of people, have you been disappointed or not in meeting people that you've thought were your heroes? And then on the flip side, what pressure do you feel to sort of be performative and, right. I mean, listen, you're an elegant guy and you carry yourself a certain way fairly consistently. So I don't imagine it's particularly challenging for you to be out in the world. But at the same time, when people, just want to bug you,
right.
Is that where do you stand on that?
So you're right though. That's a famous saying. People have said you don't want to meet your heroes, you'll be disappointed. There have been some great times meeting people. Now you have to realize different category. When you're a late night host, you meet all these people. I've often thought about that. I had a responsibility to be nice to the guests. But if I was doing something else, if I was a character, a role on a sitcom, I wouldn't be meeting all of these people, and I would just be nice to them, and etc. So there have been some people that I've met that are disappointing. And when I say met, I'm not talking about at the show because everyone turns it on. Some of the guests were rude to my producers. They do a pre-interview and then they turn it on and they're nice to me. That's how that works. But I've hung out with some people, and listen, there's some comedians that are dark and are just kind of depressed, and I don't enjoy that. And it disappoints me, but I know it's part of it. But there are also people that, like Bob Saget was the nicest guy in the world. We had dinner, just a sweet man. I got to meet Bill Murray even before I was at ESPN, and he was really nice to me, and Bill Murray was great. But there's some other comedians I had dinner with and hung out with, and they were, I'll tell you off air their names, but it was just like, it's too bad that they're miserable, and that ruins it for me. And then off of the comedians, there are other people that, you know, are jerks, but that's part of life. You know, they're jerks, so I give them their space, and I don't hang out with them, and I avoid them, and blah blah blah. As far as me, I used to kind of always be on, and I'd be quick and say stuff, but then I exhaled after I quit, and I'm like, I'll just be nice sometimes. If I'm in the mood to chat, I will bond over something. If not, I just say, nice meeting you. You know, I wrap it up. It was a pleasure meeting you. And then wrap it up. So I try to be nice to people. What I don't remember is, like, some of my friends from ESPN, they would tell me jokes I did, and I don't even remember them. I go, oh, that's a good one. Oh, that's not very good. Like, you know how people remember things you say? It's selective memory. And if you like it, like, I'll flavor profile. That's all I will remember.
Oh, God.
But anyways, does that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you for that.
Okay, we've got a couple drinking questions. I get a lot of drinking questions. Lord Kilby, gin or vodka? I know you like martinis. Well, I've said this before. I know gin is the original martini is gin with a little vermouth. I go vodka. I prefer vodka to gin. I do like the juniper berries in gin, but I just don't drink it. I think because I got sick once in college. So I do vodka. So Caleb, you're supposed to critique my answer and then weigh in if you want. How was my answer?
I like that you know what juniper berries are, because I don't.
Oh, that's why gin is floral if you taste it or smell it.
No, it's why you're sophisticated and I'm not.
Craig, do you really have one martini a week? Yes. Sometimes it's once every 2 weeks. I've cut down as I grow a little older, as far as the calendar years, not as far as physically. I look the same as when I was in my 40s. But the calendar year, I'm getting older, so I cut down. It's harder on my body, so I go one martini a week. It's called discipline. And how much do you drink, Caleb? Do you drink much, or do you cut down?
I think that during COVID, I definitely drank. I've never been much of a drinker, but I think during COVID, I definitely started drinking more, and I'm trying to not drink much these days. I prefer brown liquor, and that's just tough.
I'm glad you brought that up. Scotch was my go-to in my 30s. Once a year now at the holidays, it's too hard on my body. That's why vodka and red wine. Now, I know that tequila is, supposed to be decent for you, better for you. I drink it, I enjoy it, but I just like my vodka, and I don't drink that often, so I'm going to go with what I like. Keep it simple, young people. Craigers, on a recent podcast, you mentioned you've never seen either Top Gun movies, and you seemed proud of that. Are you? Well, I like being a non-participant in the silliness and dysfunction of life. Not that movies are dysfunctional, but it's like I live in my own world. I like to joke about that. I'm not a big fan of pop culture. I was always an island when I was growing up. I was in a hockey state in a hockey town playing basketball. My friends listened to white rock and roll, and I listened to Barry White and Earth, Wind and Fire. As I mentioned on a podcast recently, Jay Leno met me and said I was standoffish, which was one of the greatest compliments I've ever heard. First of all, what do you think of my answer? And then I'm going to ask you a follow-up. Go ahead, Caleb.
Yeah, no, I think that's just who you are. I think, you love Frasier, it's
do you love Frasier?
I do not love Frasier.
Oh.
I do not. I love Cheers. I love Cheers.
Yeah.
And that character. But not really a huge Frasier fan.
Are you like a big Office fan? Do you like The Office, the quirky?
I like everything. I like lots of things. Again, I think I appreciate this about you, that you're not one to jump on a train of something that's just popular because it's what everyone else is interested in.
Right.
You're a contrarian, which makes you more interesting.
So since I have you, I'd love to ask this. What are some obvious television shows or movies that you haven't seen?
I haven't watched network television in years. I used to watch, must-see TV, Seinfeld. The Office was probably the last network television show that I watched.
Did you watch Friends?
Yeah. I think The Office was probably the last. But since then, I there's not a single network TV show that, and I mean, like, people love Survivor. People love Survivor. I'm like, what? Like,
no, that's reality. Like, that's I don't. Yeah.
No, but I mean, like, people are obsessed with those shows. I'm like, I just don't. I don't get it. I don't. It's just like, I have no interest in. Although I did watch The Real World. Back when that was first. MTV first had The Real World. I watched a number of years of that and thought it was fascinating. And then it just, I just at some point grew out of it. But
so there are not any movies. There are not any movies that jump out. Did you see the Top Gun movies, both of them?
I did. I saw. We rewatched the original Top Gun fairly recently, my family and I, and it was terrible. I mean, it's not a good film. It's quite bad.
Right.
I thought Top Gun Maverick was highly, highly enjoyable, and one of the few movies I've seen in the theater. My wife and I used to see everything. We used to see everything in the theater. Every movie that would come out, we would go. I mean, I used to keep all of my movie tickets. For years, I kept my movie tickets, and I threw them out recently. And I realized how many awful movies I'd seen in the theater. Just movies that you have no business seeing. I saw everything. Yeah. But not recently. I've definitely, there's nothing. I don't watch horror films. I don't watch any horror films. I'm not a horror person. So anything, I have a blind spot with horror.
I'm very particular now what I watch with the movies because we have all the streaming services, but I use IMDb rating. The lowest I go really is 6.8. And I say that because The Firm is 6.8 and it should be at least be a 7 or 7.1. And so but anything under a 6.8, there have been a couple. I think there was a 6.7 movie 6.7 that I watched, but it's pretty accurate. All the Hitchcock movies are over an 8. And just for those listening, the television ratings on IMDb are different than the movie ratings. A good movie is 7 or above. Television, it's 8 or above. A lot of the good television shows are 8 or above. So some of them that are in the 7s are not great series, but it's pretty accurate. And it's weird to look back at some of the movies I saw as a kid. I saw the movie 10 with Dudley Moore and Bo Derek, and it was pretty memorable. It was the first R movie I saw, but the rating on it is not very good. When you go back and you see some of these ratings, Lord Kilby, you've posted on your iconic Instagram that you're pro-environment. Has that always been the case? So when I was a kid, we didn't waste water. My dad, I've told this before, it's called the Army shower, the 3-minute shower. You go in there, you get wet, you turn off the water, you lather up soap, you turn it on, rinse, and you're out. I don't like wasting water my entire life. I'm the first guy in my neighborhood. People know I live in Hancock Park, which is a historic neighborhood. I took out my lawn. I'm the first guy in the neighborhood. I have a drought-resistant yard with fescue and different, I have a couple olive trees, but I have podocarpus instead of ficus hedging. I don't like wasting paper. When I worked in local TV, I saw this paper with the broadcast. We would go through all this paper every day. Everyone needed a copy. The director, the camera people, everyone needed this. And I said, wow, we're in a small market, and every market in the United States with local news is wasting paper. So I don't like wasting. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on wasting and being pro-environment, if in fact you are?
I am, but I think this is a good example of you here. I want to talk about, because I'm supposed to rate your answers, I thought.
Yeah, good job.
This is a good Midwestern, this is your good Midwestern stock. My mother is originally from Minnesota, and I have cousins from Minnesota. There's definitely, I think it's in Minnesota maybe more than the other Midwestern states for some reason. I don't quite know why. Minnesota's very different than Wisconsin, different than Iowa. Yeah. There is a sort of sensible progressiveness when it comes to things like the environment and just in politics in general. Minnesota, I mean, listen, you had Jesse the Body Ventura as a governor, but at the same time has been fairly progressive and in a lot of ways. There's just a sensible quality of sort of balance, like not extreme in any way,
right.
Just like, you don't waste water, you don't waste paper. These are simple things, and perhaps it's all the lakes and the sort of connection to nature in right. Minnesota in particular, where that may come from. But I think it's probably the Swedish influence and the Norwegian influences and all that stuff, I think probably has something to do with it. Sort of sensible people.
And there were two politicians that were Democrats that were prominent. Hubert H. Humphrey and George McGovern. They were Democrats. But yeah, the people there, I haven't been, I go back once in a while. I can't fully get the vibe, but there's a thing called Minnesota Nice. But I think they're also very sensible on a lot of things when it comes to being pro-environment. So electric cars are the future and the present in a lot of ways. I think a lot of the companies have said by 2028, we're only making electric cars. How are you, what's powering the electricity? So, and I know a little bit about it. I just want to hear you first. When someone says that, yeah, you get rid of all the gas cars, but what's powering the electricity to charge the cars? Go ahead.
I can only speak from my own personal experience, which is that I own 2 electric cars. And my house has solar panels on the roof. And for the most part, I when I first got my solar panels, I only had 1 electric car. And now that we have 2, I'm actually using a little bit of energy, sort of net energy from the grid. My power bill, which I got yesterday for 3 months, is $200 for powering 2 electric cars, and powering 2 electric cars in my entire house, $200 for 3 months. So it's quite inexpensive because I have these solar panels in my house. I think there's a lot of complexity around, solar and electric power and all of it, because the problem is solar power only works during the day. And unless you have massive batteries on your house, you can't really be off the grid. You can't be off the grid anyway in any, municipality, but because they don't want you to be. But I mean, listen, there's unintended consequences to all these things. I think at the end of the day, emissions are the biggest thing. That's the biggest concern, fossil fuel emissions, and trying to restore the earth is why these things exist. Of course, batteries are bad. Where do you put these batteries in these electric cars? And truthfully, if everyone's going to have electric cars, we're going to have issues with power because everyone's going to be charging their electric cars. So of course, there's how these things really truly play out. Again, the unintended consequences of all these things. You're going to have, brownouts because everyone's charging their electric cars at night. In Southern California, when it's 95 degrees at night, in those sort of increasing sort of heat waves in California, especially. I mean, the best thing about living in the desert here is the fact that it gets cool at night, generally speaking. But there's a couple of months, now a year where that's tough. So yeah, I'm not smart enough to know how you really game these things out, but I do think that, the benefits of electric, outweigh the unintended consequences.
Did you buy the house with solar panels or did you install them?
Got them installed. Yeah.
Wow. Was it pricey?
Very. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very pricey, but worth it. I mean, I would, if I was driving to my office in Culver City, I'd be, spending $100 a week on gas. I think it'll ultimately pay for itself. And I also don't really care. It's not about the money so much, but I do think about that a bit because, I pay, the solar panels are paid for. I don't think about it.
Do you have an issue with the range of your electric car if you travel up to San Francisco?
I have not. I'm about to drive out to Palm Springs, which will be the longest trip I've taken in my electric car. We have, as a family, we have a gas car that we take to Northern California. Like we drove up to Mammoth this past week to ski, gas car.
Is that a Hummer?
Exactly. Yeah.
So just to quickly wrap up this thing, my understanding, and I've talked to people, nuclear energy has to be on the table to help power everything because I don't know if you know that, like the wind power and the solar power, if you talked about units, it's too expansive how many windmills you need for a unit of energy compared to nuclear energy. But I know that's controversial because of the hazards of nuclear energy.
Again, I'm not that, up on that specific topic, but my recollection is that nuclear energy was created as a kind of clean energy option, that was supposed to be sort of better. Obviously, it has tremendous downside when there are accidents, which is really the biggest thing. And I think, where you put the, used uranium or whatever that has to go into a mine in, a mountainside in Montana or Nevada or something. Again, trillions of years from now, that stuff's going to still be there. But Again, I'm not smart enough to know. This is why we need better leaders, frankly.
We need
smarter people to figure this stuff out.
I think maybe your intellectual friend who does want to pay taxes would be a really good guest.
Oh, I don't know.
I'm just kidding. Okay, last question, because we got to wrap up. I know you're busy with your family today, and I've got to go for my power walk. Kilby, when you're not listening to Bill Evans, that's a jazz piano player for those of you at home who don't know, what's on your playlist? Well, I never try to force my jazz on other people because I know they might find it boring. I find it relaxing. When I go for my walk or hike, I listen to up-tempo music. I sometimes put on a station I created. It's called the Boz Scaggs Station, but they play a lot of different stuff, obviously, besides Boz Scaggs. Here are some of the songs I don't skip over, and you can laugh at me if you'd like to. I like covers. So Hall & Oates covers I'll Be Around by the Spinners. I enjoy that. There's a song that they also cover called Someday We'll Know. That was a New Radicals song. Daryl Hall does it at Daryl's house, which is always entertaining. Eddie Money, Shaken. You can laugh at me. I listened to it in college. Shaken. Stand Back, Stevie Nicks. Theme from Cat People, Bowie. So that's because I'm walking. I need a little energy. I need a little up-tempo stuff. Thoughts on my answer there, Caleb?
I mean, this is one of the things I like about you is your very specific taste in all things. So,
do you like any of those songs
music.
I mentioned?
I was thrown off by the Cat People theme song. That's a deep cut. I'm going to have to pull that one up. I remember seeing that film when it came out. Or I saw it on a VHS tape or a Betamax at my friend's house. So I need to revisit that one.
Putting Out Fire with Gasoline. There are a couple versions. One is very up-tempo and one is a little slower. It's just Bowie is pretty special. But I didn't know if you'd make fun of me like my brother does for liking Eddie Money.
I mean, no, not me. But you had a lot of good stuff, though. You had, Stevie Nicks. I'm a big, Fleetwood Mac fan.
Right.
As I've gotten older, I just, to me, easy listening, anything from the 70s, that's easy listening like that just makes me feel good. So
I swear, someone told me this quote from the former Steelers coach, Bill Cowher, and I love this. And he said, I care about three things in life. I talk about people who are not well-rounded, because football coaches, they have to think football most of the time, right? They study it. They enjoy being these guys that study the different defenses and offensive schemes. So Bill Cowher says, I care about three things in my life: my family, football, and when I drive to practice, listen to 70s music. I love
That's
that.
Great. Thank God he didn't say never mind. Faith.
Okay.
Usually the guys like that throw in faith.
Right.
Family, faith, and football. Thank God.
This has been a joy. We went off on different topics. I hope the listeners enjoy that. Caleb is thoughtful. I want you to think of him as more than the flavor profile guy. Don't hold that against him. And thank you, sir. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's our show. We'll see you next time. And remember, young people, I'm proud of you.